Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing telephone etiquette and sniper selling. It's going to be a great show today. We've got a fantastic guest in the studio. My guest on today's show is Anthony Steers, the telephone assassin. And we're going to be looking at the most effective way to approach cold calling. I wish I could talk today, and also telesales as well. Anthony, it's lovely to have you with us today. The telephone assassin. Yes. It's a bit of a frightening title. For those people that don't know anything about you, just give us a brief overview of who you are.
Okay. So I'm a keynote speaker and I do deliver training. Generally, people think it's either sales training or customer service training, but fundamentally, I teach people good manners and a bit of advanced common sense, so give them a bit of structure.
So you stand up at a stage and you tell a lot of people what they should be doing. There's this whole thing, isn't there? Like on LinkedIn, for instance, you link in with somebody and the first thing it comes back and says, start a conversation. And I suppose the thing is that 99.9999999% of us don't. Is it very similar when it comes to picking up the phone and calling clients and customers?
There seems to be a reluctance quite often to pick up the phone. I describe it as phone phobia, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. But for a lot of people, with all this digital communication and stuff now, it's so much easier to show that you've got it off your desk by sending an email. But what people don't seem to realise, and particularly in sales, is that doesn't complete the task. It just gets it off your desk and puts the ball in somebody else's court, which usually then goes quiet, and you then end up with a pipeline of things that are never going to come through.
Right. Now, I heard you speak a little while back, and one of the things that you said, being a sniper, you don't use very many bullets, so you're quite targeted. Yes. In your approach to telesales and cold calling. Yeah. And I thought that was a really interesting statement to make. Do you think there are a lot of people out there in industry or are doing the job professionally, and what they're doing is they're just working on the numbers game?
Yes. So sales will always be a numbers game, but there are certain old-fashioned sales tactics and phrases that you hear of things like each no is one step closer to your next yes, which is a statement designed to make people slightly more thick-skinned so that they can deal with rejection. But it's not really good advice, I don't think, anymore. So sales will always be a numbers game. I'm not disputing that, but it's not about getting past the rejection or over-objections. It's about capitalising on the conversations people are ready to have. And this is where a lot of salespeople typically go wrong, is they try and jump to a close too soon. They haven't built any trust, they haven't established their credibility, they just want to say, OK, this is my pitch, do you want to go ahead with that?
Effectively, they're picking the phone up and throwing up all over them.
Yes, yeah. I usually describe it, you know, when you can tell somebody's reading a script and they launch straight into it, I describe it usually as premature elaboration. So, yes, blurting that pitch over anybody who answers the phone, which just typically sets off alarm bells that say it's a sales call, be careful.
What about the linguistics that we use these days? Is that got a bearing on it as well, the way we say things, the way we phrase things? I know when I read your CV, you've done a bit of NLP, so am I a chicken yet? But you know, you know what I mean? Yeah. It is all that positioning, it's placing and being ready to, you know, to get the response that you've already programmed them to do. Do you remember the old days when it used to be, if you phone up, get the 3 yeses, wasn't it? And then yeses. When you go for the 4th yes, they'll say yes.
So, I worked very closely with an NLP master trainer. I'm not an NLP practitioner, so for those that most people know neuro-linguistic programming, some people use it for hypnosis to give up smoking, lose weight, that kind of stuff. They say that you can reprogram the channels of which you're thinking. Some people use it to model excellence. For me, it's kind of weird. I used to say things, oh, in this situation I would say this, and this NLP master trainer would go, oh, that's a classic NLP technique. He's doing this and he's establishing that. And no, I wasn't. I was just trying to prove that I know what I'm talking about and asking an intelligent question. And I was trying to reassure somebody while questioning what they've said. So I found out that I was doing things that apparently are certain types of techniques, but all I really do is listen so that I know what to say next.
See, there's somebody that I knew that I always felt was a born salesperson, and in the way he would phrase things, the linguistics that he would use when I was talking to him, and it wouldn't matter if you were going out for a drink with him, you always felt he was selling something to you. He was just that kind of guy. And I'm just wondering, are you in the same boat effectively as he is? Is it just your terminology, the way you've been nurtured, the way you've been brought up has given you the appropriate skills? And sometimes, because it's nurture, that can be quite difficult to transfer those skills.
Yes, so it's interesting because I've been told by a couple of neuroscientists and people who understand people's behaviour, and I'm quite rare in the way that I listen and I communicate with people. For myself, I suppose I might argue the fact I've got two older sisters. So in my earlier years, I was used to communicating with females who are very good at talking about their emotions and caring. And I don't know if it's as black and white as boys and girls, and they're more nurturing than we are, but maybe that's affected the way I listen to people, the way I ask questions, maybe how I know that emotions play a big impact in people's lives. And actually, once you understand their emotions, it's much easier to help guide a conversation or give them what they need. And a lot of the time we're all looking what's in it for us. And I say that there's opportunity in every conversation that you have, but most of the time it's not for you, which is why you don't notice it.
Are we brave enough, do you think? Is that an issue, perhaps, when people are picking the phone up? We're not brave enough to actually continue the conversation. We're not brave enough to take it, to control it, to take it to the path, to take it to the destination we want to go?
I don't know if I would say it's about bravery. I think a lot of people have had bad experiences with being cold called, or earlier in their career they were given a script and they literally used to go and have to blurt it over anybody who would answer the phone. So they have this really negative association with picking up the phone, and the last thing they want to do is put themselves in that category where somebody might consider them to be a cold caller. So half the time what I try and encourage people to do is to have a bit of a plan before you pick up the phone, because if that gives you the confidence to know what you're going to say and the fact that you know you can demonstrate that you're very credible at what you do without sounding boastful, and you've got on offer what I would describe as a test drive, a way for you to demonstrate your value to them, it can't really go that wrong.
When you're called in by businesses, regardless of the size, you go into an organisation, you assess and see where the problems are. What's the thing that comes out of your mouth the most often? Is there one single most common mistake that businesses are making when it comes to picking the phone up, or is it just not picking the phone up?
With some companies it's not picking the phone up, and some of them it's picking the phone up without really thinking. Probably the thing that I really reiterate more than anything else is that manners are the greatest tool that you have when it comes to influencing
Nicely
people.
done.
And they cost nothing, and that's the funny bit about it. And quite often, if people have been given some old-fashioned sales tactics and a more aggressive way of trying to trip people up in conversations or ask them questions that the person knows you know the answer to, it just kind of feels a bit uncomfortable. And once you give people an approach that feels not salesy, a way to prove that they're credible and a way to create urgency, actually all of that fear goes away. And manners is the best way to disarm somebody at the beginning of a call, and that's often what I end up saying to people.
Which leads us on nicely to the title of the programme, the whole idea of telephone etiquette. What do you mean by that?
So, one of the best tips, most common tips that people often try and phone me up and go, I can't believe that actually worked, is I talk about getting permission to speak at the beginning of every outbound phone call that you make. Quite often the person that you're phoning is not expecting your call, so you're interrupting their day, and the temptation is to have this little script that sounds really good and prematurely elaborate all over them as soon as they answer the phone. But most of us have enough courtesy about us that we'd at least say, oh, could you talk for a minute? Are you free to speak for a second? Or something along those lines. Whereas what I get people to do is to introduce themselves and assume assume that now isn't the best time and make it okay for them to get out of it. So if I was going to phone you, I'd be saying, oh, hi Steve, my name's Anthony Steers. We're just hoping to chat to you for a couple of minutes, but I know you're busy. Is there a better time to call you back? And by doing that, I make it very easy for you to get out of this call, which tells you one of two things. One, I'm either definitely not in sales and I'm not to be worried about, or if I am in sales, I'm rubbish at it. And I'm still not to be feared, really. So the fact that I make it very easy for people to get out of the initial part of the call, I don't tell them what I want to talk about, I just tell them that I'd like to speak to them for a couple of minutes and then assume there's a better time to call back. You'll find that if you phone 10 people, if you're having a bad day, 7 of them won't even be in the office. So I don't even leave a voicemail typically if they don't know who I am or they're not expecting my call.
You don't?
I wouldn't on my first attempt, particularly if they don't know who I am, unless it's an inquiry that you're responding to. But if I'm prospecting, then no, I wouldn't leave a message on my first attempt. Of the 3 that may answer the phone out of 10, 2 of them will probably say something like, actually, Anthony, you're right, I'm about to go into a meeting, or I'm just finishing out a tender. Could you give me a call back at 3 o'clock? Or would you mind giving me a call on Friday? And I just book it like it's a scheduled meeting. Sometimes I might even send a calendar invite. But at least 1 out of 10, or at least 1 out of the 3 that have answered the phone will always go, well, go on then, Anthony. I've got 2 minutes now. What's the call about? And the beauty of that is that they're giving you permission to speak. They're curious about why you've called. Whereas what most people tend to do is launch into an elevator pitch that they think sounds really good and enticing.
But at that point then, do you find that, OK, we've now got permission to speak, do you then find that people will then launch into their elevator pitch?
So really, the approach I always say, the best way to perfect your pitch is to share a success story people can relate to. So it's basically using a case study or a testimonial of somebody similar to them and let them explain what it's like to work with you, because people are going to trust what clients say about you more than what you say about you. And that's where most of us struggle when it comes to selling, particularly if you run your own business, because you have to stand up and tell them how good you are. And we all cringe because we feel like we're boasting or bragging, and actually it doesn't come across that well quite often. So you can let your client speak for you. And I would say it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or a landscaper. The principles of being effective on the phone work exactly the same. One just speaks with a slightly posher voice.
Listen, more from my guest today, Anthony Steers, on this edition of Business Connections Live. He is the telephone assassin, and we're going to be looking at the most effective ways to approach that cold calling and also telesales. And maybe we'll go through some of the scripts that you can use when it comes to that initial introduction, when you introduce yourself to your prospect in the future. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company on today's programme, and a terrific show today. It's something that I find really fascinating because the whole thing around this, I love the idea of the linguistics. I love the way of having at least some structure to what you're doing, and so many people will either A, do nothing, or B, will do it so haphazardly that it just isn't going to work for them. So a really good show today, and there's going to be lots of advice for you on today's programme. All right, let's go back a week now, shall we, and find out what happened on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. We were talking to Jonathan J about buying a business without using your own cash, removing the risk from the purchase. Now, this programme was a real insight into how you can purchase a business without risking your own money. Normally, people, when they think about buying another business, they're going to be going to the bank, they're going to be borrowing money from relatives, they're going to be putting their house on the line. But Jonathan explained a way that you can do all of that, or not do all of that, and go out there and purchase a business and actually, double, triple, quadruple the amount of money that you're making. And instead of maybe growing your business over a period of 5 to 10 years, you can actually double and grow your business over a course of 12 to 24 months. It was a good show last week. If you get an opportunity, do check out the entire programme. But if you did miss it, here are the highlights from last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing how to buy a business. I mean, maybe it's a dream that you've had. Maybe you've seen an organisation and you've thought to yourself, do you know what, I would love to run that. But is it a case of reaching deep into your own pocket, finding the cash, talking to all your family, all your friends, going to the bank manager, cashing in maybe your pension, and you think, right, I've done it, I've got this big bucket of cash. I'm going to buy that business and make a success of it. Or is there another way? Joining me in the studio today is Jonathan J, entrepreneur and business owner and buyer.
I think the misconception that people have is that to buy a business, they need to remortgage the house, they need to cash in the pension, as you said, and find as much money as possible, give it to the seller of the business. The seller of the business gives them the shares, the swap has been done, and then they've got this business that might or might not work. So it's very, very high risk for people, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. So I work with business owners who want to grow their business via acquisition, but quite typically have been held back because of that misconception. They feel as though they would put everything on the line. The best piece of advice is to get educated on how to buy a business. Don't rely upon your accountant, don't rely upon your lawyer, rely upon yourself and your knowledge of how to buy a company. The mistake that people make is thinking that they can't do it. So they see a business for sale, maybe it's a competitor, maybe it's a complementary business, maybe it's part of their supply chain, and they say to themselves, if I buy that business, I can go from $1 million a year in revenue to $2 million a year in revenue. That might have taken me 10 years if I was going to be running more Facebook ads, hiring more salespeople, but I can do it this year. And then they talk themselves out of it because they feel that their ability to buy a business is completely determined by how much money they have in their bank account, and that simply is not true. It's entirely possible to de-risk an acquisition where the payment that you make for the business is dependent upon the performance of that business. So if the performance goes up, then you effectively pay more for it, but if it goes down, then you pay less for it, so you're never out of pocket. But for many people, they say, well, I'm not making much money out of the business now, but I'll make money in 10 years' time when I sell it. Well, why don't you make that selling accelerated? Let's move it closer to now. Let's not wait 10 years of not making very much money. Why would you do that? Life is too short. Let's buy another business and make that business that you've got now twice the size, and then we can sell it this year or next year rather than waiting 10 years. And then let's do it again, and let's do it again, and let's do it again. So instead of waiting for retirement to hit that moment where the money drops into your bank account when you sell the company, and everyone then hopes that that's enough money to last them through their retirement, let's do it this year. Let's do it next year. Let's just keep on doing it and become a deal maker as opposed to a business operator. So if your challenge has been accelerating your growth, hiring the right people, getting the management in place, and you can't seem to get past go, well, let's go and find a company that's got that in place already. But the thing is, the people who make the most money in business are doing exactly what we've just talked about. They're not turning up at the office every day. They've moved from being an operator into being a deal maker. And of course, we understand how the world of private equity works. What I'm saying here is that the SME business owner can become their own private equity firm and make acquisitions. So first of all, it's attitude, it's believing that you can do it. So it's attitude and confidence. You've got to have the confidence that you know what you're doing, which leads us into number 2, which is having the knowledge and the skills. That's very, very important. So if you've got the confidence, you've got the knowledge and skills, you need the right team around you. So the right accountant, the right lawyer, the right due diligence expert, the right HR person, the right tax person, the right team to support you, because you can't do it all by yourself. And then you need deal flow. You need to have deals. You need to have businesses who are interested in selling their business to you. And I never go to business brokers. I never go to adverts on websites or in newspapers. I go and source businesses myself. I get them to come to me. So I'm Jonathan J from the Dealmakers Academy, and for the last 20 years I've bought and sold businesses. And what I do now is help business owners acquire other businesses without risking their own money. And that's really, really important, because people think that their ability to buy a business is based upon their ability to access capital either from their own bank account or borrow money from the bank and secure it against their house. I never let anyone do that. What we're going to do is we're going to buy a business, maybe your competitor, a complementary business, a similar business, the same business as yours in a different part of the country or even a different country. And we're going to do it without risking your own capital. We're going to de-risk the transaction so that you never overpay for it. And we're going to take your business from where it is now to where you want it to be, not in the next 5-10 years that your business plan might say, but in the next 12 to 24 months.
Jonathan Jay there, fantastic programme last week. You know what it's like when you're sitting and you're interviewing somebody and you think to yourself, I could do that, I could do that. Oh, that's interesting, I could do that. All the way through. I was convinced that by the time I'd get out of the studio that Linda would have sold the business or at least bought another one. It was just one of those kind of shows, a real insight into what you should be doing and a completely different approach when it comes to growing your business by acquisition. Great show. If you do want to find it, just check it out on the website, Jonathan Jay's programme, and how to buy other businesses without risking your own cash. Good show. And by the way, if you thought this show or his show was very good and you watch the programme on a regular basis and you're thinking, you know, I'm putting this newsletter together every month, and in fact, what I'd like to do now is engage my audience a little bit more. Why don't you consider having a show just like this one? Turn your readers into viewers. And if you've got something good to say, they will be engaged and they will watch. And that's the whole purpose of this. Now, if you're interested in doing that, or maybe being on the programme, maybe as an expert guest, well, all you've got to do is very simply drop us an email here at Business Connections Live. It's studio at businessconnectionslive.com. Just drop us an email there. If you want, though, even better still, pick the phone up. Don't have a script ready. We're very approachable. Pick the phone up. Give us a call on 01784 256 777. That's 01784 256 777. Of course, you can always follow our stream of consciousness on Twitter at BCL Business TV. You can watch the programme, you can comment on the programme on our Facebook page, where the programme is live streamed each and every week as well. I know so many of you actually do watch it there too, so thank you very much for that. But the best place to go for over 300, nearly 400 hours of great business advice is to go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. Well, you're watching Business Connections Live. Steve Hyland with you here. It's great to have your company on this Monday. We are live at the moment. If you're watching on catch-up, thank you very much indeed. If you just downloaded us on iTunes, maybe you're listening to this on your way into work on a train at the moment, take the advice that we're talking about today, take it on board and use it in your daily business. My guest in the studio today is Anthony Steers. They call him the telephone assassin. Do they call him, or does he call himself that? The telephone assassin he is. We look at the most effective ways to approach cold calling and telesales. We were talking earlier on about etiquette, telephone etiquette. Let's just define that for our viewers. When you say that, what do you mean?
Part of it's around using good manners. A lot of salespeople try and use little tricks to get past people, or they're rude on the phone, which I personally don't think will help them in any way, shape or form. And it's about having respectful conversations with people. Everybody has the same favourite topic, which is themselves, and we now live in a digital world where everybody overshares online. So if you want to engage with somebody and into a proper conversation, do a little bit of research first and give them the respect to know that they're not just another name and number on a list, and that's why you phone them.
Are you in the camp that says we should start relationships with people? Are you, for instance, everybody says on LinkedIn, start a relationship. and other people, we're going to have Angus Grady on the program, he is the LinkedIn unlocker. Now, his opinion is actually, yeah, well, start a relationship, but not a long-term thing. What you're trying to do is, do you want to buy this or don't you?
Yeah, so you've got to determine whether you're looking for a fling or your wife, basically. That's it. With regards to customers, some people just they've got one product and they just want to sell it and move on to the next one. People have go, oh, you do telesales. Well, not really. What I try and help people to do is to cultivate relationships using the telephone. So technically, my speciality is sort of business development and helping people package up what they do so that they can present it in a way that people want to buy it and they can demonstrate the value. The problem that people then have is once they have this, they need to go and share it with the world. And unless you're spending lots of time and money and effort on SEO and getting found online, or you've got huge advertising budgets, then the best way to do it is what I would refer to as sniper sales or whale fishing. You can. So
listen, don't throw that out. Yeah? Don't throw that out and then just walk away from it. So sniper sales, which is what we're talking about, sniper sales or whale fishing, two great words, or four great words. What do they mean? What do you mean by that?
So before I started my own company about 13 odd years ago, I used to sell databases. I used to help people profile their databases, and they always used to say, well, you want to sell me as much data as possible. And I'd end up saying, well, that's the opposite of what I want to do. I want you to buy a wish list, not a database. So whenever I work with my clients, we do wish list campaigns. We don't do database stuff, because database stuff is intimidating and is churning through the numbers. What I try and get people to do is to create a wish list of clients that would make a massive difference to your bottom line and spend the time to nurture to get into them. So get a list of 20 and within 6 months you should be into at least 10, 12 of them potential customers. So you do need to spend time nurturing a relationship with people.
Is that one of the biggest mistakes, do you think, that people actually do make when it comes to they have a list of 1,000 people and it's the numbers game here, isn't it? 10% of those are the people I'm going to get through to, when in fact they could actually be approaching maybe only 10% of that list and be more targeted?
Yeah, you need to tailor your pitch to the person that you're speaking to. So you need to make them feel like what you're saying to them isn't exactly the same as what you would say to somebody else. So you do need to flatter people, and you can't research thousands and thousands of people. That's often what scares people from picking up the phone in the first place. The intimidation of this huge list of people that I've got to try and call through. And then once you try and give them this sales is a numbers game and each no is one step closer to your next yes nonsense, you tee them up for failure and get them to literally go and bang their head against a brick wall, and hopefully they knock it down before they knock themselves out. And it's why staff churn in telemarketing departments is higher than most other departments in any company.
If you're wanting to build that relationship, how much research do you need to do? Because it's very easy to get lost, shall we say, in doing the research, because that's a good excuse for not picking the phone up.
It certainly is. It certainly is. It kind of depends, really. I think 5 minutes Googling somebody, looking up their LinkedIn profile, seeing what the latest news section of their website says, seeing what they're tweeting about, any recent articles that they've written, doesn't take very long to quickly scan over and just try and see. Basically, you can tailor your approach to them. So the example I often give is I've worked for lots of IT companies in the past, and usually you're either selling IT to an IT manager or to a director or an FD who signs off the checks for the IT. Now, an IT manager wants to know, is it compatible with the software that I'm running at the moment? Is there any patching or maintenance I'm going to have to do? Are you going to help me train my staff? That kind of thing. Whereas a finance director wants to know, when am I going to get my return on investment? How is it going to reduce waste or increase our productivity?
So understanding what's in it for them.
Yeah, so a director is more likely to talk about culture change as opposed to training, whereas you're basically selling the same thing to the same company, but you have two quite different conversations depending on who you're speaking to. And that's all it's about. It's about understanding who you're talking to so you can use language that they are used to using. So that whole sharing success stories people can relate to, if I'm talking to an L&D director, so learning and development director in a big company, I might not have a case study of another company who does exactly what they do, but I'll probably share what another L&D director says about me, purely because they'll probably have similar language, similar values about them, and they'll be able to connect with this person's position. So it just allows you to adapt and have a very personal conversation with you that's tailored to you, not just a script that I can meander away from every now and then.
Do you think we target the wrong people instinctively, that we're always frightened to aim for the right level of commitment, the right person that makes a decision? Do we find that difficult to do sometimes because of maybe the way that we believe in ourselves? I'll talk to him because he's about equal to me.
I think there's a little bit of that, but my advice is always aim as high as you can. I'd rather speak to the top boss who says, yes, this is interesting, but it's my ops man who deals with that, go and have a chat with him. And then I can phone his ops man and say, your boss says we need to have a chat. It makes it much easier for me to tell him what's going to happen, as opposed to ask him, trying to sell the concept to them and then raise it up. So there's a little bit of intimidation, but I actually think that once people turn that feeling of intimidation into flattery towards the person, and you tell them why you respect them so much, their head starts to swell, you can hear their ego expanding, and all of a sudden they're really enjoying the conversation with you and they're happy to answer some of your questions.
Let's look at the actual process then, shall we? And you've kind of alluded to it there. So you kind of put it down to 3 individual steps, or at least there is a framework that is made up of 3 individual steps. Can you take us through the framework? Now, we've got about 5 minutes, so go as far as you can, and then I will stop you.
Okay, no worries.
So where do we start then?
So I talk about the 3 phases of the conversation. They can be broken down into many more steps, but there's 3 basic phases in what I would consider to be a successful business conversation or prospecting conversation, or even to deal with an inquiry. The first element, basically you need to build rapport with them. the best thing you can use here is really good manners, and just show them a lot of respect. Respect for their time is a really great demonstration of that, getting permission to speak. If you built rapport with them, then they'll start to like you. And if they start to like you, then they'll listen to you, which then gives you the opportunity to move into the next phase of the conversation, where you need to demonstrate, or you need to establish your credibility at what you do. So this is where using your case studies and your testimonials come in. So you can say, well, look, I've helped 5 other people just like you recently. Look at what they're saying about me. Okay. What you'll tend to find in the credibility bit is a lot of people try and do name dropping. So they just name drop their biggest client, which usually just intimidates the person that you're talking to and makes you feel good rather than makes them feel secure that you can handle them.
But it's so easy to do, isn't it? We do this, and you see it on websites, don't you? Look at all the big people that we work for.
Yeah. Absolutely. But once you've established your credibility, in fact, you'll probably notice it on a lot of the TV adverts now. It's usually customers talking to the camera, basically saying...
Testimonials.
Yeah. The We Buy Any Car advert is lots of people on there explaining. And the best thing about that is what they were very clever at doing is they overcome their biggest objection or biggest fear from people in their advert. They put it out there. You might get more money elsewhere. But if you value your time, and then they start showing people in family situations who would be giving up time with their family, so what they basically demonstrate is you might get a tiny bit more money, but deal with us because we can make it happen.
It's very interesting because in the days of the shopping television, a testimonial call would be more effective than hours at a presenter talking about a particular product.
Yep.
If somebody came through on the telephone and said, you know, I've just bought one of those, I just had to phone up to say how great it was,
Yep.
the sales would go through the roof, they would rock it.
Yeah.
So really, effectively, you're doing the same thing, that whole testimonial thing.
Yeah, well, it's basically the referral model. A lot of people go, I built my business on referrals. You go, oh, well, congratulations. It's probably the reason why you're still a relatively small business, because you've basically gambled the growth of your company on your existing customers, meeting people, having conversations where your topic comes up, and then hoping they're going to recommend you. Whereas if you get them to write down in black and white what they think about you, you can now you can now leverage social media to get that message out there, so more people will see it.
Do you think people are frightened about going back to existing clients or current customers and saying to them, look, would you mind giving a glowing reputation,
Yes.
kind of a testimonial?
I've worked with quite a few membership organisations, and quite often they'll have a rescue campaign, which is in month 11, where they realise these are all the people they haven't spoken to throughout their membership, and then they need to phone them up and ask them to renew. And I always laugh at the fact that it's called a rescue campaign. That means you've ruined it. You're going to have to try and rescue this now, and by building in regular contact with people, it stops that from happening. But with lapsed customers, I often say, take ownership for the fact you've dropped the ball. Phone them up and say, oh my God, I'm just phoning to apologise. I've just seen on our system nobody's bothered to speak to you or has had a chance to talk to you in the last 10 months. I'm assuming you haven't had any issues with our products or our services, or you haven't needed our help, but I just wanted to let you know we haven't forgotten about you.
When you're saying this to your clients, do you see moments of revelation? Do their eyes glow all of a sudden? You go, God, we're doing that. We're not doing that. Do you see that happening? That moment?
Yeah. As soon as I deliver my talks and my training, I tell people 90% of the stuff I talk about you will already know, and you probably use about 70% of it. So you should feel quite reassured you're doing a lot of the right stuff. But hopefully you'll get 1 or 2 little tips and gems that, when you start implementing them, mean you enjoy it more. You get better conversations and you get a higher conversion ratio, because that's really what it boils down to with these conversations for your business.
You've done point 1, you've done point 2.
I have.
You've got point 3 in just a few moments' time. The other thing I want to talk about are test drives as well, because that's something else that you are a big advocate for as well, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. In fact, that's the third final stage. You establish a bit of...
Well, don't start it.
Oh, no.
No. Don't
go yet.
Don't peak. Don't peak too soon. Just hold yourself. Just hold yourself for a moment. My guest of today's show is Andy Steers. He is a telephone assassin. Hope today's information has proven to be useful for you. The biggest problem with this programme today, I think, is when you listen to what Anthony says, is then going away and actually doing it. Because we're all very good. We all know the theory. We probably actually do know all the things that Anthony is saying, but we never implement it into our workday. We just don't do it. We don't do it on LinkedIn. We're probably easier or better at doing it, responding on Facebook and places like that. And maybe that's another question for Anthony as well. Is that a place that you could be selling as well? And is that a good way to be building a relationship with a potential customer in the future? media. More from Anthony Steers, the telephone assassin, just a few moments' time here on this edition of Business Connections Live. As always, lovely to have your company. We're live on a Monday. It's great to know that you're out there and you're watching the programme. Thank you very much indeed. Now, here's a show that really ties in really well with today's theme. Michael Graham joined me on the programme. He was on the show back in June 2015. It was a really interesting show. He was talking about sales training and coaching. He has a very different... Does he have a different approach? Actually, no, he doesn't. But he just says it in a different way. And I think what it does as well is it qualifies. If you have that fear of picking the phone up, here's what Michael Graham has to say about that.
I think the first thing is if you don't want to pick up the phone, don't pick it up, you know? And that might sound really unsalesy. Like, if you don't want to pick up the phone, don't pick it up. There's other ways to get clients than the cold calling, you know? There's, if you think about it, there's so many different ways to get physically in front of your prospect other than... I'm not saying don't do cold calling, but if you really don't want to do it, and the reason behind that is because as human beings, think about it when you were a kid. If you didn't want to do something, you tended to not be very good at it. The moment you wanted to do it, you were good at it, right? Just purely because you want to do it, attitude, your mentality. So if you really, really don't want to pick up the phone, if it's just something you don't want to do, then find another way to get in front of people. If it's my first phone call, I want to get it to the next step. So this comes down to the sales process, the journey, the emotional journey that you're taking a prospect on. Very rarely you're going to pick up the phone, depending on what products you're selling, obviously, and close someone on that first phone call. You might, depending obviously what the product is. But if you're talking about a high-ticket item, you're never going to close someone on that first phone call. There has to be a process that you take them on. If you were a prospect, I want you to come and meet me with the mindset of you're ready to buy. That's the sales meeting. Anything other than that is just me trying to manipulate or me trying to trick you. And we don't want that because that's not a strong sale. You're going to get cancellations. You're going to get clients that are not happy with you. Whereas if the prospect can come to you with the mindset, I'm ready to buy, I'm interested in buying what you have, it's much better.
Michael, they're talking about mindset and the like as well, and I suppose that's what we're doing. We're getting this acceptance that you're phoning up. You're getting permission. You're getting the person on the other end of the phone to actually be in the right mindset to receive the information that you're about to get there. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's interesting. They say it differently, but both of them are saying exactly the same thing. Michael Graham there on the program, if you do watch the entire show, he talks about creating the perfect sales pitch, how to effectively close your customers, how to generate more leads through various social media platforms, how workshops and events will help them generate leads, which is interesting because what they do, they have quarterly events, workshops that people go to absolutely free, and while they're there, that's when they build their client list to all intents and purposes. How to effectively sell, how to close clients effectively, how to create the perfect sales pitch, and how to use social media to generate sales. So the one thing that was interesting about what Michael was saying, he says, so if you're uncomfortable using the phone, then don't use it. There are other ways as well, and that could be down, I suppose, to networking. But at some stage, you are going to have to talk to somebody, aren't you?
Yes, yes. The best thing I always think for curing phone phobia is I give an analogy about your outbound phone calls, particularly if you're prospecting, need to feel like you're dropping off a pizza menu. So what I mean by that is we all get takeaway menus put through our letterbox on a weekly basis, but I don't think any of us or many of us have had them come and knock on the door and say, "Hi there, can I take your order?" Because that would just be rude and very presumptuous. And when I tell people that, they often kind of snigger or laugh, and I end up listening back to their call recordings, particularly if they're more aggressive salespeople, and
that's exactly what they're doing.
That's exactly how they come across. And I say, so you're wondering why people are slamming the phone down on you or being rude at you or just waiting for you to finish and run out of steam and prematurely elaborate over them so that they can then say, would you send me an email? So, yeah, if you often lead with the most common objection, which is you're probably not looking for our services right now. You make it okay for them to talk to you about when perhaps it might be the right time for them.
Okay, very, very briefly then, just a quick summary. Point one?
Point one is about building rapport with people, using good manners.
And point two?
Point two is about establishing your credibility by sharing case studies and testimonials.
All right, let's then talk about point three, which I let the cat out of the bag, didn't I, a little bit. I did pour water on your powder there.
Don't you worry.
Yeah, thank you. So number three then.
Third part of it is around creating urgency. You want them to do something as a result of this conversation. So with marketing people in their adverts, they want a call to action. But to create urgency, what you really want them to do is make a decision to move forwards. So if they like you, they know that you're credible, the best thing to do is to offer them a test drive. And that's a bit of deliberate language I use with people, because it's got a bit of a universal understanding that a test drive is I can try before I buy type of thing. And it's a great way of getting your foot through the door, particularly if there's an incumbent supplier already, but a good way of getting your foot through the door and demonstrating your value before asking them for any huge commitment or finance up front. So you just give them a bit of a taster. So I describe it as a test drive. I got a statistic a few years ago from a great speaker who told me that you are 78% more likely to buy a car once you've driven it.
But is that going to be suitable for all markets? For instance, a car is something you can take for a test drive. Yep. But if I'm offering a service, is this you pick the phone up and you go, I'll give you consultation on the phone for an hour? Is that what you're saying by a free test drive?
Potentially that could be it. So I usually say that there are different levels of test drive that you'll use for different situations and different scales of opportunity. So the lowest form of a test drive is usually a tip sheet. The 10 do's and don'ts. If you offer a service, there's probably people out there who are trying to do it themselves or are doing it badly. If you can give them a list of the 5 things they should be doing and the 5 things they shouldn't be doing, it's a great way of giving them a bit of value without having to give them too much time. So you might use that at like a business expo type environment where there's lots of footfall. You don't want to spend ages talking to one person. You want to gather lots of data, but you still want to give people some value. So a tip sheet or frequently asked questions document can be really useful for a lot of people. The next thing up is usually a bit of potentially consultancy. I mean, if you're an insurer, for example, your test drive is to offer them a quote. You'll research the market and you'll provide them a quote. That is your test drive. If you sell products, you might send somebody a sample of the product and ask them to test it out. You might invite them to a day where they can come and try out different products and do some market testing. So there's different things that you can do. If you have software, you might allow that you'll give somebody a demo of the software first. That's your first test drive. Once they've seen the demo and they say, wow, this is really good, you say, well, why don't you use it for 30 days for free and you can try it out.
But these are all proper services, aren't they? So these are proper products, they're boxes, and so you can go, there's the box, try it for a little while. But there's going to be a lot of small businesses who are offering a consultancy service. So the only way that they're going to do is they will be feeling that they are devaluing what they are offering by giving it away for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you can.
And it is a gamble, isn't it?
You certainly you can think of it like that, but. There's a great speaker I think you know as well, Steve Clark, who a great sales trainer, and I remember him getting questioned a while back. Somebody put their hand up and said, Steve, you give great tips, but you give your best tips away for free on your website. That makes no sense. And he looked at them really confused and just like, well, what am I supposed to do? Give them my crap stuff and then see if they come back for more? Which kind of made a bit of the audience laugh, and you just thought, well, actually, he made a great point. If people had found him and decided they wanted to buy, they were going to buy. If they decided that they didn't want to buy, they wouldn't. But if they were sat on the fence, he had a chance to sway them into wanting to do business with him. And his best way of doing that is sharing his great stuff that people can implement and see the value in. I do it with people all the time. I deliver.
So what do you offer them?
So
there'll be a flood now of calls.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes, so,
we can get a free consultancy for an hour. I thank you.
So I do have some tip sheets. I don't tend to use them as much anymore because I don't do a huge number of the business expos. But quite often, if I meet a potential speaker booker who's interested in finding out what I do, I might give them a free copy of my book. That's another example of a test drive. I may send them some videos, a show reel of me speaking. I may even invite them to come and sit in the back of the room of another gig so that they can see me in action. From a training perspective, quite often I jump on a video call. I say, get a handful of your team to come on a call for 45 minutes or so, tell me what their biggest challenges are or their most common objections or situations that scare them perhaps, and I just share with them the 3 simple steps they have to take people through, give them some tips around the specific objections, but I do it on a condition that if I give you an hour of my time, in 2 weeks' time you'll give me some written feedback to tell me when you've implemented it, what value that's had to you. And the beauty of that is that sometimes they may only have one little issue, and if I give them advice and it fixes it, they write me a lovely testimonial that says, we spent an hour with Anthony and now our meetings have gone up by 30%. Okay, I could solve that problem, and I've got value back, even though I'm not going to turn them into a paying customer. I'm going to ask them to write that on LinkedIn so that other people and their connections can see it, and I can share it with other people too. But what usually happens is I just whet their appetite, and they realise that not only have I fixed this problem, but I can probably help in other areas. And it's just a great way. I often make people take a test drive before they can book me, even if I've been recommended and they want to book me straight away. And when I was asked the very first time, well, why are you making me do a test drive? It said, because I need you to know how good I am before I tell you how much I charge. Because I'm a lot more expensive than sales trainers. I'm not a sales trainer. I teach people telephone etiquette and a structure that allows them to get what they want out of a conversation, whereas a lot of sales training is more sales tactics, aggressive tactics, presumptive closes, trying to tie people up and ask them trick questions that lead them down a certain avenue. It just doesn't really work. It's not a very genuine way. I always say I don't teach people how to sell, I just show them how to help their customers to buy. And if you go down that route, it's just so much easier to help somebody who's interested in what you do rather than just trying to close them. And another great sales trainer who was a mentor of mine early on told me a great salesperson earns the right to make a recommendation. And it's such a great statement, because he's absolutely right. And quite often what you tend to find is people will usually have two main questions. Mm-hmm. How much is it? How quickly can I have it? Because time and money are the things that they value most. But how much it is isn't actually necessarily an important detail, because your finance man wants to know, when do you have to pay it? Can you spread the payment? There's other factors around your price other than how much is your actual cost. So you usually answer the questions that they ask you and they want to know the answer to, and then say, but if I was you, these are the questions I would be asking. So if you're talking to me or anybody else, ask this question, and this is why it's important. And once you help them to make better decisions on their purchase, they then realise you know more about doing this than they do, and they say, well, OK, you know me now, what would you do? It
sounds like the techniques that are used when you're bridging and when you're bridging in an interview, actually. Yeah. You're telling them what to ask the questions on. Yeah. You're actually signposting it for them. Yeah. Really, really interesting concept. When you do all of this, how do you measure the success of it? How do you measure the success, certainly, those KPIs? Because everybody seems to be driven by statistics and numbers and figures. So how do you know you're getting your return on investment, that ROI?
So, a couple of different ways to look at it. Quite often, staff churn should go down after my training, because we're not encouraging people to go seeking rejection and get beaten up all day. So that should be one of the first signs. And there's a huge telemarketing company I've worked with in London who 3 months afterwards, that was the boss's main comment. It was, oh my God, nobody's left. In fact, he went, we've asked 2 people to leave, but nobody's left. And this hasn't happened, doesn't go a month without somebody wanting to leave. But the real answer to your question is about what I would describe as the KPIs that count. A lot of people have these key performance indicators in their business, and when you apply it to telephone activity, you usually measure, well, how many calls did you make, how many meetings did you book, or how many quotes did you do, and then how many deals did you close. And they are valuable things to measure, and you should know roughly what those figures are.
And how long you've been on the phone is the other one, isn't it? How long a call lasts.
Call times as well. The problem that you find is that none of them directly really relate to each other. You can try and pick up trends by looking at data over a long period of time, but just because you made 50 calls yesterday and booked 2 appointments doesn't mean if you make 100 calls today you're going to book 4. And with a number of
But this is what a lot of sales trainers tell you. This is what a lot of trainers, they say, know your numbers. Know your 100 numbers. Calls, yes. You'll get 50 appointments, you'll get 10, 10 face-to-face, and you'll get 5 people at the end.
Yeah, and appointments, again, I look at the quality of the conversion of appointments. So when people come in and say, we need more appointments, I say, OK, well, let's work on the conversion first, and then we'll turn the volume up, because quite often their conversion is nowhere near where it should be, and that's usually one of the big issues. So, for example, you'll often find that Thursdays are the days where the teams that book appointments book the most appointments, and you might argue that it's getting close to Friday, people are in a better mood, and that perhaps that's why it's a good day for selling. I personally think it's because a lot of people are behind target by Thursday. They're getting towards the end of the week, they've got pressure from their manager to hit their target for booking meetings, and if they speak to somebody who is kind and nice enough to invite them in to have a chat and come and have a coffee, regardless of whether there's an imminent need, they're going to book that appointment. Well, that's what you've targeted me for. And that's where most companies go wrong, and they'll come to me after they've had an issue with outsourcing. They'll go, oh, we've outsourced it, it started off really good and then it's fizzled off, and then we found a new company and the pattern seems to happen again. And I always just turn around and go, brilliant, so have you told them how to do it properly? well, no, they're the professionals. And I kind of go, so you've got no right to complain. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, is they're scared of picking up the phone, so they outsource it. And they'll outsource it to somebody who's usually had old-fashioned training, who's doing that numbers game thing of throw enough mud at the wall and some of it will stick. But the problem, the danger, I think, with that technique now is that because we live in this world of social media, you upset the wrong person and you're rude to somebody down the phone, they are going to say something about you online. And if you do that to somebody who's got a lot of followers, you end up in this horrible trap of having to create lots and lots of new marketing literature to bury all of the bad things that people are saying about you.
But reputation management.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I always just think, don't risk it by forcing a conversation people aren't ready to have. Just capitalise on the conversation.
So what is the KPI then that's important that you see? I mean, you said they're all the ones we shouldn't be using. What are the ones we should be looking at?
So what you should be doing is breaking down your sales cycle into steps. So I create sales cycle points for most of my clients. So a generic, quite simple one or example of that would be, to get 1 point, you've just got to find out who's the senior decision maker. And you might be able to do that by going onto LinkedIn, typing in a job title and an industry and getting a list, okay? You could score 20 points by copying and pasting them into a spreadsheet or into your CRM, okay? But if you score 100 points in a week and they're all one-pointers, we know you're not picking up the phone, okay? To score your second point, what you actually need to do is speak to that person. So in my mind, if it's not an inbound inquiry and they don't know who you are and they're not expecting your call, if you send them an email or leave them a voicemail, well, that's -1 point, because you're going to decrease the chances of them taking your call next time. But let's say you get through to the right person. What you need to establish is, are you the right person? You're the L&D director for this company. Are you the person responsible for booking training? Because they might turn around and say, well, actually, it is in my remit, but we have a training manager. That's who you need to speak to, and you'll get deflected. But you've got to talk to the right person. And once you've got to that right person, all you really want to do is drop off your pizza menu. So to score your third point, all you need them to do is say, yes, I am happy for you to drop off your pizza menu, which some people twist my words here. The dropping off of the pizza menu is in the phone call itself. Okay.
So it's not a physical pizza menu.
It's not a physical pizza menu. However, there is
the placing of
however,
in the
there is an
mind's eye.
email that is going to follow this conversation, and that's the real trick that I say to people: is I use emails to create to document the conversations that I've had. I don't try and have my conversation by sending emails and swapping it, because it's too much like hard work. I use email to create a paper trail for the conversations I've already had with somebody. So after that conversation, what I want you to say is, actually, you're right, Anthony, we're not looking for your services right now, but we might be towards the end of the year. Yeah, happy to look at a couple of case studies of companies like us. Please send them across. Okay, and depending on what kind of conversation we've had, you might have alluded to the fact that your customer service team have a particular issue or something like that, and I might have a tip sheet that I'll say to you, well, I'll also include my tip sheet in the email to you. And that's usually me scoring 3 points. I've got to the right person, I've established that there might be a potential future need for my services, and I've got them to agree for me to send them an email. So that's your third point. That's usually the end of a first call if you're prospecting. Your fourth point will be to follow it up and actually speak to them. And I'll always say to them before the end of the call, well, if I email this over to you, do you think you'll get a chance to look at it over the next week or two? And I always say a week or two because it's a nice, reasonable time frame to give somebody. And the default or most common answer is, oh, yeah, I'm sure I will. So I then just say, well, in which case, Steve, I'll leave the ball in your court. If there's any urgent questions or concerns or anything you want to know, please come back to me. But if it's okay with you, I'm going to make a note in my diary to just touch base in 2 weeks' time, just to make sure it got through your spam filter and see if I can perhaps offer you a little test drive and show you what I do. Most people don't have an issue with the fact that you're prepared to follow up in 2 weeks. It just shows that you're efficient. I'm not sounding pushy. And that follow-up call is your fourth point to say, hey, Steve, we spoke a couple of weeks ago. You asked me to email everything over. Can I just double check? Did it get through your spam filter? And I'll ask you if it got through your spam filter, not if you've read it. Because if I ask if you've read it and you haven't, you might feel bad for it, or you might feel that I'm being impatient. So I might start to come across pushy. Whereas if I just say, did
it get through the spam filter?
Did it get through?
Yeah, it did.
Most people then go, oh yeah, it did. And then they'll usually say something like, oh yeah, it did. I flagged it. I've not had a proper look yet. And they'll give you an excuse, but they'll confirm that they've received it. And at that point, I always turn around and say, well, look, I'll happily talk you through it. But as I mentioned last time, why don't I offer you a little test drive and let me show you what it is we can do? You've mentioned this problem. Why don't I show you how I would try and fix that? And your fifth point is them agreeing for you to do a test drive. And that could be, like I say, sending them a book, setting up a discovery meeting or a free consultation. But it just gives them a reason to move forwards. And let's just say that the test drive is to book a meeting. So that's your fifth point. Okay, your 6th point is sending them a calendar invite to confirm when you're going to see them so that there's a paper trail. Your 7th point is phoning them 24 to 48 hours before the meeting is due to take place to see if that time still works or if they need to shuffle it slightly. Okay, people who have had a lot of more aggressive sales training would say, oh, well, don't phone them the day before. You're giving them a chance to cancel.
Just turn up on the door.
Just
We're here.
turn up. Yeah, but a lot of them, a lot of field sales guys I've worked with, and one of their biggest frustration is getting 3/4 of the way to a meeting and then seeing an email that they've cancelled. And I don't care about how many meetings people book. I care how many take place. And this is how I started to notice that little Thursday trend. And actually, if you phone them up and say, look, I'm due to come and see you tomorrow at 12 o'clock. I just wanted to double check firstly if there's any parking, but I've got a second meeting that I could shuffle around if I needed to. Are you still okay for that time? And it's a great way of, if they need a bit of flexibility to keep it in the diary, you can offer that to them and keep it in the diary, rather than waiting till the morning of the meeting and getting an email to say, I can't make it.
Hold that thought. More still to come. I hope you're finding it interesting. You're probably sitting there now scribbling down notes. Anthony Steers, my guest today, the telephone assassin, on how we should be approaching the whole prospecting and sales call on the dog and bone. More to come from Anthony in just a moment on this edition of Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company. We're live on a Monday as always. Can we just thank you all for all the people that watch the programme, be it on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku, on Stitcher, on Blueberry, and all the other platforms that the programme goes out on. The big boy, of course, out there is iTunes, and thank you very much to everyone who downloads even the programme on iTunes on a weekly basis. Thank you very much. Thousands of you are doing that on an ongoing basis. Also, the response we're getting on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is proving to be very, very effective, particularly for the shorter pieces, the kind of the key takeaways. Thank you for doing that. But for iTunes, where you can download the entire show, have it on your smart device, and then take it with you on your way to work. That is fantastic. And it's dead easy to do, and you can help us out there as well by leaving a stunning review about the programme. We'll be talking about reviews. Find the programme in iTunes. Just log into your iTunes account and then find Business Connections Live and then go to the ratings and reviews tab. Just click on that and then that'll bring you to another tab which will allow you to write something wonderful about the programme, allow you to give it 5 stars, say how terrific Anthony Steers was, how good the advice was, 5 stars for him. And by doing that, what will happen is that through the algorithm that is iTunes, when somebody is watching another not quite so superior programme to this one, when somebody is watching that, at the end of it they'll be recommended to watch Business Connections Live. So you're sharing the knowledge across all these platforms. Please do that. It really does help and grow the programme as well. So make certain when you're on iTunes, leave a great review and give us a couple of stars. That'd be great. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is Anthony Steers. Here is the telephone assassin. We're looking at the most cost-effective ways to pick up the phone and talk to prospective clients, what you should be doing about that. If you're doing it, you're not finding that you're very successful. We've been through an approach just a moment or so ago. I love this point system because it's got a flow to it, hasn't it? Did we get to the top of the flow? Did we do it? So just remind us very quickly. Go through the points.
So your first point is establishing who the right person is to speak to. Your second point is actually talking to them. Your third point is them agreeing for you to drop off your pizza menu, which is in the conversation itself, but will be followed up by your email. Your fourth point is to follow up on that information that you've sent to them and encourage them to take a test drive, which is your fifth point. Once they've taken a test drive, you'll usually then, like I say, send them a calendar invite to confirm the appointment. Phone them the day before is your seventh point to make sure that the time and everything is still okay. Your eighth point would be turning up 10 minutes early. Would be typically a good one. Ninth point is don't get thrown out, and by the end of it you should be offering them some form of proposal or recommendation as a condition of your meeting, is that hopefully you can give them a bit of advice and perhaps a proposal of how you could help them.
Leading question, you get a lot of people who are trainers or speakers and they will give a process and don't do it themselves. Do you do that yourself?
Yes, so at the end of my training sessions, we do a live call clinic. I don't tend to do role plays because people, one, don't enjoy them, but they are either really kind and it's pointless, or they're really horrible and it's horrible. So what I tend to do is quite often at the end of my training sessions, I make live calls on loudspeaker. I show people the structure and the techniques in action. Usually they think I'm really brave because there's a whole room full of people all listening in.
Well, Gordon, my director today, he said we should have got him to do a live call. Yeah. And, to be honest with you, Gordon, for once, was right. We should have really, so be it then.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I get asked, will I do live calls on stage, so as part of my keynote? And I don't at the moment, and I don't think I will, purely because if I hit 3 voicemails on the trot, it's not that exciting. Whereas when you're training, there is that element where that can happen, and they're a bit more forgiving in a room with trainers of training, for example. But it's lovely for me because it allows me to really put my money where my mouth is. I get about 3 seconds of pure glory. I mean, when I'm dialing, they're all going, "Are you nervous?" And I go, "Yeah, a little bit." "Are you?" And they go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this." And then it rings, and they're like, "Oh my God, is your heart racing?" And it's like, yeah. And then usually the phone call kind of happens in usually exactly the way I always say it's going to happen, and they clap like it's a magic trick. As soon as the phone goes down, they're like, oh my God, you're so brave. But then they go, "Oh my God, it really is that easy." And once they realise I know far less about their products, their services, or even their pricing, yet I can have a really positive conversation, they start to think that actually maybe they've been overthinking this telesales approach, and actually they just need to engage people in a conversation and be passionate enough about their product to be able to help people to buy it.
That is a danger with all of this, isn't it? And I think everybody is looking for that pill, aren't they? That's going to just make it easy, but everybody overthinks the pill.
Exactly, yeah. And most of us, it's in our head, generally, the thing that's stopping us, and it's usually a bad experience we've had with somebody phoning us, or in our earlier years phoning somebody else and them being rather mean to us.
All right. It's been very interesting so far. Last point then that we've got to look at, the power and the importance of research. You kind of alluded earlier on to it. So
yep.
Where do you do your research, and how much research do you do? Because you've just said there that you did a very successful call. You had no knowledge at all, but you were able to do it.
Yeah, because the purpose of the call was to establish a future need with somebody who is interested in talking to us at some stage. So I was dropping off a pizza menu. I've had... I live in an old house, so the front door is on the side of a Victorian house, so I have to walk up the path to my car, and I've on 2 occasions passed the guy who's dropping off the Domino's menu, and as soon as he's clocked me, he's waving this menu to make it really... He went, "I'm just dropping this off," and it kind of made me laugh because he was just making it very clear, "I'm not selling anything. And
I'm just dropping it off."
I'm just dropping it off. So I graciously took it from him, turned around, he walked off, and as he was out of sight, I did put it in the recycling bin because I've got one inside the house, okay? And I graciously took it because I knew he wasn't selling anything. And actually I was respectful to him because he showed me the respect in not just trying to close me and sell me something. And I think if you can do that, then most people are relatively happy to talk to you. And I often use the phrase, "I just want to get on your radar. I know who you are, I just want you to know who I am."
So the research then, where do you go? Is it predominantly LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is probably my favourite place. It's pretty much like an online CV, and many of us have got job interviews based on our CV before. People have read it and made some assumptions about who we are. So it will tell you a little bit about who somebody is depending on what their job has been, so that can help. I also would look for somebody up on Facebook. I probably wouldn't tell them that I've looked them up on Facebook because that becomes a bit stalkerish, whereas on LinkedIn it's professional research. So if I was going to phone you, I would tell you what's so impressive about your career and all the stuff you've done on TV, and that's why I really wanted to reach out to you, because you're obviously very knowledgeable. So I would use the information about you to let you know why I think you're amazing. And the clever thing really
Thank
is...
you so much, Anthony.
If you can tell a potential customer why you think they are your ideal customer and why you can bring so much value, they start to realise that perhaps you are the best possible supplier for them too. And all you're trying to do is start cultivating that relationship.
So LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere else you would go?
Look on Twitter a bit as well, obviously. All the social media platforms are useful. Okay, it will tell you what people are talking about, what they're interested in. There are countless places you can go looking. But you alluded to the fact that earlier on, if you spend half an hour researching every single person you're going to phone, you're probably going to hit quite a few voicemails as well. You're going to lose hours every day. So one of the tips that I often give people is when you find their LinkedIn profile or the Meet the Team page of their website or their latest blog, put a link to that into your CRM system, so that if you do hit a voicemail and you have to phone them back tomorrow, next time you get into that record, you can go, "Okay, who's this guy? Okay, it's Steve, brilliant. Okay, let's go LinkedIn profile, meet the team page, and I want to see what he's blogging about." Straight away, I didn't have to dig to find this information, but I've got it there to refresh my memory again. So lots of places to look, but yeah, online, Google people. I get annoyed when people go, "I can't find any information about them," or "I can't find a phone number."
Do you know what? The hour has flown by. It's been, I knew it would be, it's been a really interesting hour, and I always feel that when I sit here, all this wonderful information is just coming out, and I hope you've found exactly the same thing when you're watching the programme, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this. If you felt to yourself, you've gone down a sort of a cul-de-sac at the moment, you find that you can't just move forward, you can't grow those sales, you find the telephone really difficult, you don't like the whole approach to it. Maybe we've given you at least a structure that you can go around, and maybe you can be very targeted as well when it comes to what you're trying to achieve. If you want to find out more about Anthony, you can go to his website. We increase sales is what it's saying on the screen at the moment. There it is. Anthony is a leading expert on telephone engagement, specialising in helping businesses to improving customer service levels and sales results over the phone. It's a good site, actually, some really good content and information sites, some good videos as well. If you want to find out a little bit more about his speaking, we'll go further down the page. It's one of those sites that just grows. So he does breakthrough coaching, group training, and also professional speaking. I've seen Anthony several times when it comes to his professional speaking. It's a good presentation, and also he's got a book as well that you can buy now, available, of course, I would imagine, on Amazon.
Yes.
Yeah, of course it is. Just click on the link and you can buy it. Okay, we always ask our guests at the end of every show to give us the key takeaways. Not an ad for you.
Okay.
You do that at the end, of course, but the key takeaways that our viewers can go away with from today's program that's going to increase the way, or change the way perhaps, that they now approach everything when it comes to sitting down. Make them into telephone assassins. Straight down camera number 4, the airwaves are all yours.
Thank you very much.
Say who you are and where you're from.
So I'm Anthony Steers, also known as the Telephone Assassin, and I try and encourage people not to hide behind their emails and social media and just make conversations to move things forwards. The thing I'm really hoping most people have picked up on is that manners and etiquette is one of the best tools that you can have on the phone. And if you take that respectful approach of just dropping off a pizza menu when prospecting and making it feel like you're not trying to take an order, just get on their radar, you'll find that people are very receptive. And if you can follow the 3 phases, which are spend the time to build rapport with people, so do some research first and be very respectful of them and their time. Then establish your credibility by looking at case studies and testimonials that you've got that you can share with them that they can relate to. And then finally, make sure you've designed a test drive that creates urgency and gives them a reason to be able to move forwards and for you to demonstrate your value. So as I mentioned earlier on, fingers crossed you're actually feeling pretty reassured you're doing a lot of this already. But if you can get 1 or 2 little gems that make a difference, then hopefully I'll give everybody the confidence to pick up the phone and the skills to make every call count.
Listen, thank you very much, Anthony Steers, the Telephone Assassin, and you can go to his website. The web address is
www.anthonysteers.co.uk.
Simple and as straightforward as that. Just go to the website, you can find out more about him. You can also book him, you can find out what he can do for your organisation and for his business. You'll also notice as well that his branded colours are everywhere. The tie, the suit, it's all there. So, and thankfully they're very similar to our colours as well, so it all fits in quite nicely. Anthony, once again, thank you very much indeed for joining us on today's programme and for coming in today. So what we got for you coming up on future programmes, Michael Brooks going to be joining me on the programme in a couple of weeks' time. We're talking about professional excellence sales training, what he does. If you've got a training course inside of you and you'd like to have maybe passive income, or you'd like to expand your basket of goods that you've got out there, then Michael Brook can actually do that for you. He'll sit down with you, he'll structure the training for you, he'll put the script together, he'll even film it for you as well, or you can film it here if you wanted. But Michael's really, he's done this for a number of years. He's a very, very smart guy, and what he can do, he can turn a training course that you're doing on a daily basis into something that could be earning you passive income on an ongoing basis. So do watch out for that show. That's Michael Brook. Also got Angus Grady coming on the show. He's the LinkedIn unlocker. He'll be on the show very shortly. Slightly different approach to some of the other people like Steve Mills. Steve's got a way of using LinkedIn. We've had Mr. Potter on, the LinkedIn man. He's got another approach when it comes to LinkedIn. But Angus, I love Angus's approach. I mean, the mere fact that he picks the phone up and sends postcards out, and he sends videos out, all those kind of things. It's just different. And I suppose with all the noise that is out there at the moment, you've just got to raise your head above the parapet, get above the noise so that people recognise that you are there, and then they will interact with you. Also, we've got Deborah Hume from Minerva Engagement. She's a neuroscientist. She's going to be on the programme very shortly in the near future too. So that's just some of the guests we've got lined up for you in the near future here on Business Connections Live. Do you know what? We do it all again next Monday at 12 noon. But for the moment, from from myself, Steve Highland, and my guest, Anthony Steers. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next Monday at 12 noon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.